Okay, now we're going to talk about Richard Ed Green. Where are you, Ed? Oh, there we go. You're not in the VIP slot, I can't tell. All right. Ed is a visionary scientist and entrepreneur, instrumental in founding some brand names that you may have heard of: Cantata Bio, Claret Bioscience, and Astrea Forensics. Is it Claret or Claret? Claret, all right. My French was coming out. All right. Santa Cruz-based companies advancing DNA extraction and sequencing technologies. His innovations have solved cold cases spanning 7 decades. And now we want a story when you come up here. As UCSC Santa Cruz QB3 director, Ed inspires and trains the next generation of biotech founders, empowering graduate students and postdocs to turn groundbreaking research into impactful startups, fueling entrepreneurship and innovation in biotech. Come on up, Ed.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the introduction, and I just want to say I am incredibly happy to be recognized and to get this award and get a chance to talk to you all about what we do up there on campus and what I have done as a company. Before I do that, though, in a real small world moment, I would like to tell Tim, who I've never met, you have an application for the math circles from a 12-year-old called Henry Green. You should pay special attention to that. And his middle school math rival, Josephine Cantor, who applied for math circle.
Everybody's allowed. Show up and go.
Okay, I won't tell them that, but that's good to know. This is the extremely meaningful award for me. I have won one other local award. I got the Positive Coaching Award for Santa Cruz Little League, and it also meant the world to me to be recognized for things that one does locally. So I am a professor of biomolecular engineering at University of California, Santa Cruz. I started back in 2010 doing that and developed technology for doing something that's very simple in concept, getting DNA out of things that don't have much DNA, and it's really crappy DNA, like really old bones. My project as a postdoc when I was in Germany was sequencing the genome of the Neanderthal, which we were able to do, and compare that to the human genome. My boss for that won the Nobel Prize, and I got to clap for him that he did that. Very well deserved. Yes, we'll all clap for him again. He did a great job with that. And I have kind of continued in that thread, developing technologies for doing DNA analysis, getting DNA out of things that have very small amounts of DNA, and learning what we can learn through this record, analysis of this record of the past. If you think about it, you as a living organism have written in your DNA what you are, which is a descendant of every generation of life all the way back to the origin of life on this planet. It's just DNA that's been copied over and over and over again. And you, like everyone, are very special in that none of your ancestors through all of those generations ever died before they were able to reproduce. And that history is written there in some form. That's a ton of super useful, incredibly cool information. So that kind of, in a broad strokes, is what we do, and it has developed some technology that we've been able to spin off into companies. I have to confess, I don't know anything at all about making companies. I happen to run into people who know what they're doing and have spun off some companies, and then Cindy and other people in their infinite wisdom have said, why don't you be in charge of telling people how to do this? And like, I don't know how to do it myself. I just, some other people told me how to do things. But I'm going to tell you, just because it's interesting, I think, the origin story of a company that I have called Astrea Forensics that does a new kind of DNA-based forensics that, to me, is a very I also want to mention all of my companies are still here in Santa Cruz and have employed dozens and dozens of UC Santa Cruz students. And that's the right business decision, and it's important for lots of reasons. But this company, Estrella Forensics, that is up in Scotts Valley in the Enterprise Technology Center, it has an interesting story. Back in 2016, there was a family that lived in the Rossi Street neighborhood in San Francisco, and they were doing some renovation work on their house and had gone up somewhere else, Montana, to stay with family, a big renovation project. And the workers were digging underneath the basement, and they hit something that they dug up, and it turned out that it was a small metal casket with a little girl buried inside, and a glass-cased casket, where, when the workers dug this up, they looked at it and said, this is not the normal kind of rock or pipe or whatever that you see. There's a dead child in a casket underneath your house. So they called the homeowners and said, is there something you want to tell us? We found something underneath their house. And they had no idea what this was. And a little bit of research from the homeowners, they were trying to figure out, why would that be there? Why would there be a girl buried in a casket underneath our house? They basically didn't have the first clue. They got in touch with a woman called Elisa Davy, who is a real-life saint walking on this earth, who runs a project called Garden of Innocence, that when a child is found dead and no one claims the child, she will help provide a dignified burial and do what kind of needs to be done for in that situation. She said, this isn't the normal kind of situation we get, the normal kind of case, but I will help you. We will put together a group of people and try to figure out who this girl was. And we were called in to do DNA work, if DNA could help at all to figure out who this little girl was buried in the casket. And they didn't want to do any kind of disrespectful sampling, so they cut some hair and sent that to us for DNA extraction. That set us on an odyssey of trying to figure out, can we get DNA out of cut hair, rootless hair? And the answer is yes, you can get plenty of DNA out of rootless hair. It just happens to be completely useless for the normal forensics assays that you do. For technical reasons I won't get into, that's all PCR based, and you need big fragments of DNA. DNA in your hair, plenty of it there, but it's just in short fragments, so you can't get a genetic profile or what typically is done in forensics. But you can sequence it. We have great technology for just sequencing that DNA. We've got machines on campus. Convert this using some technology that we developed into a form that you can put on a sequencer and just read all those ACs, Gs, and Ts. Meanwhile, while we were doing that, the DNA work, the team that Elisa put together also included genealogists and historians and other folks, and they got to work to try to figure out what the heck could be going on in San Francisco that a little girl would be buried underneath this house. And they quickly discovered that that house in Rossi Street is in a neighborhood that was built where there used to be a cemetery, the Oddfellow Cemetery. So, big clue, yes. Detective, yes, this is a clue. Maybe we should pay it. There used to be a cemetery here where this house was. That cemetery, like every cemetery in San Francisco after the big earthquake, all of that was exhumed, and all of those burial sites were moved down to Daly City, where you now see the cemeteries acres and acres and acres. There was big consensus amongst the folks in San Francisco that this is what needs to be done. We need to, after the earthquake, all the markers have fallen over. We don't know whose tombstone is where. We don't know anything about this. And we need the land. We're running out of space here. Let's dig up all these graves, move them somewhere else out of the city, and then we can have more real estate to develop. So that's what happened. And they just weren't as thorough as they should have been. So it was a kid who died and was buried in the Oddfellow Cemetery in San Francisco. They found a bunch of old maps of this cemetery, and using Google Earth and a very, very important aerial picture of San Francisco that was taken from a plane in the early 30s when in the Bancroft Library, they have a series of these aerial pictures of San Francisco in the early 30s. They were expecting Amelia Earhart to fly over, and were practicing how do we go and get her in flight across San Francisco, picture after picture after picture of San Francisco, right at a time where that cemetery had been exhumed, but the new neighborhood hadn't been built. And you can see the little paths in the cemetery, figure out where on a map the different parts are, and find that house. Where is that house? Where would it have been had that cemetery still be there? They came up with 3 possibilities, 3 young girls that could have been buried. Turns out kids used to die young a lot in the past. And we tested all 3 of them, developed some technology to find, the genealogists found living relatives of those people who are around now. We can get DNA out of the hair. And it started us on this quest of, well, how do you do that? How do you take this DNA and ask, are you related to that person? With this kind of crappy small amounts of little fragments of DNA, develop that technology, and we're able to solve this. Turns out her name was Edith Cook. She died in 1876 at the age of 3. And we were able to identify her and have move her to her family's place down in Colma, and have the strangest cemetery funeral that you have ever seen, of a bunch of people who didn't know this girl, but came there out of curiosity or for whatever other reason, and rebury her, reintern her. So that trying to solve this particular problem caused us to develop a technology that we thought would just end there. It just so happens that this was on the news, on the local news, and there is a person who lives down in Marina, down near Monterey, called Barbara Ray Venter, who at the same time was working with the FBI. She's a genealogist. She's actually a retired patent attorney. She wrote the patent for the Flavor Saver tomato, and the ex-wife of Craig Venter, who was the person who sequenced the first human genome that was in a race with the public effort that was won by UC Santa Cruz, the heroes up there. So she divorced him because he was a loser. He lost that battle. Actually, I'm sure he's a great guy, and he's nice to his mother and all those things. But anyway, she was working as a genealogist on this new thing with the FBI, something that would become known as forensic genetic genealogy. That if you have, she was working on the Golden Killer case, amongst others. If you have DNA from someone who has done terrible things, and they don't match anybody in the FBI's CODIS database, what you can do is make a genotype file, like you would get from 23andMe or Ancestry or one of these direct-to-consumer companies. And there are other databases, not as big as those. Those companies don't let you search their database, but there are other databases comprised just of people who have said, yes, you can search my DNA. And you can find not your bad guy, but the 3rd cousin and the 2nd cousin and the 4th cousin, and figure out who this might have been, come with a suspect list. They were doing this at the same time. So Barbara Ray sees this thing on the TV and calls me up and says, can you really get DNA out of hair? And I said, yeah, we can do that. She goes, well, I saw that thing on the news. That was kind of cute. Do you want to do something real? And I'm like, okay, yes, I do. I do want to do something real. I've been waiting for this call. And she introduced me to her colleagues at the FBI. There was an agent down in LA, Steve Kramer, who had kind of gone rogue and was doing this despite the fact that the FBI said, stop doing this, you're just making problems. And there were a few years where he would just bring case after case after case to my lab where they only had hair. That's all they had. The only DNA-bearing evidence that they had was a hair. And one of the first cases that they brought, this is going to get a little bit dark, and we just have to live with that. an 8-year-old, not funny at all, 8-year-old girl was abducted on her way to school and raped and murdered and thrown in a drainage ditch, and the only thing that they had were a few hairs found in her underwear. And that was one of the first cases that Steve Kramer had us do. We got a conviction on that last summer. They were able to not only identify this person, but prove that it was him. Yes. I spent a lot of my last summer in Canyon County, Idaho, testifying at that trial. 26 expert witnesses, a lot of hired guns saying, this guy doesn't know what he's doing, this DNA stuff, what is that? You can't get DNA out of hair. But in the end, took the jury 2 hours to agree that, yes, that hair does come from you and only you, and we can tell from the DNA. Thank you. So, that's Estrella Forensics. We, after some time, it became clear that doing this casework in an academic lab, I never asked if that was okay, Sin, yes. But it was more comfortable to spin that off into a company, and as it stands now in a little lab up in Scotts Valley, we are doing active casework. Our customers, it's a strange company where our customers don't want us to talk about what we're doing, and we don't really care to talk about it either, but many of the highest profile cases in the world now, when you have only hair, you want to know from this single hair, who in the world is this? We have technology for doing that, and try to employ this for good purposes. That is it for me. Maybe I have gone over.